and welcome everyone. It's Sapphire. I hope you're having a great day. Um, well, the rock and metal world lost a titan and a legend 2 weeks ago, and I just wanted to pay my respects. I'm, of course, talking about the godfather and wizard of heavy metal, and the prince of darkness himself, Ozzy Osbourne. Fans of rock and heavy metal are now certainly going through some emotional changes. Personally, not too many celebrities or musicians' deaths have hurt this much or hit this close for me, other than, say, Chris Cornell, Chester Bennington, or Keith Flint, among a few others. Rest in peace to all of them, and rock and rest in peace and in power to you, Ozzy. I was originally just going to just talk about this sad news at the beginning of another video, but I thought this deserved its own video, and I also don't have anything for that video other than a script ready yet. But I plan to do a brief astrological reading on Ozzy and his life towards the end of that next video, so keep an eye out for that. This video is, of course, going to be a little different from my usual fare. I am not going to be asking for likes, subscribers, or donations. If some of you wish to throw a like or a subscribe my way, that would be nice and much appreciated as always, but it's not necessary. I would feel so wrong asking for subscribers or donations or making money off of a dead person, let alone Ozzy. Like I indicated, the content of this video is of course very different from my usual fare. You may be asking, why is an influencer known for spirituality, mindfulness, motivation, peace, love, and light commenting on the death of a rock star, let alone a rock star known for dark and heavy content? And to that, I would say, you don't know me. I am a lover of both the lighter and the darker side of music, and the music of Black Sabbath and Ozzy Osbourne has and will always hold a special place in my heart. Of course, I love talking about peace, light, and love, and providing content that uplifts and motivates people. But I am all too aware that life is not all sunshine, rainbows, and unicorns, and I don't wish to feed people the illusion that it is. Sometimes life can be downright difficult, dark, depressing, and unfair, and I frequently also talk about this darker side of life with the aim of being more real, down to earth, and relatable with people, and also with the aim of letting people know that they are not alone, and doing whatever small action or little gesture and providing whatever resource, however small or valuable, to help folks overcome and rise above life's darkness. So why then not comment on the life and passing of such an influential vocalist and frontman who has touched my life and who is also known for dark, deep, and heavy music, yes, but who, as we'll see in this video, also occasionally sung about the lighter and spiritual side of life and provided messages of love, hope, and unity, as well as touching ballads. As they say, you can't judge a book by its cover. And Ozzy's life and music are proof of that. His approach to music and to life also explains a lot of his popularity. Not everyone wants to hear shiny, happy, uplifting music all the time. Ironically, sometimes dark, deep, and heavy music about real poop in life is exactly what we need to hear, especially during dark, hard times in our lives. People want to feel like they're heard, and they often want to hear a sympathetic voice who feels their pain and relates to their problems rather than just bouncy beats and cheery saccharine lyrics all the time. And I am frankly no different. Life can indeed be a hard road, albeit hopefully filled with a lot of plenty of moments of fun and joy. Ozzy and his bands were so influential. I was literally hearing his and their influence before I even really got into or knew much of his and their music. For better or worse, I'm going to date myself, but as a child of the early 90s, I grew up with primarily alternative rock, grunge, and post grunge, new metal, pop punk, ska, and emo, and a little bit of reggae and rap as well. Most of the music I grew up listening to, except perhaps reggae and rap, may not have existed if not for Black Sabbath and Ozzy, at least as we know them today. I didn't grow up listening to Ozzy or Black Sabbath except for the occasional song I'd come across on classic rock and mainstream rock slash pop radio stations. I always loved what I heard when I heard their songs. I just never really got deep into it. It wasn't until my college days in the early 2010s that I got deep into his catalog with both Black Sabbath and his solo career, and it changed my life and made me a super fan. I won't get deep into my personal story right now, but even though I had just entered college studying the major of my choice, 2009 to 2010 was kind of a dark, heartbreaking, confusing, and isolated time in my life for personal reasons. But when I started exploring the music of Sabbath and Ozzy, among many other bands and artists of the time, I heard a sympathetic voice who seemed to feel my pain and relate to my problems, however indirectly, and that was a huge comfort to me. He may have penned the lyrics for his more recent song, Gets Me Through, as a love letter to his fans, getting him through and keeping him going when his health was starting to fail him. But his music got me and millions of others through our own hard and complicated times. And I'll never forget later that decade working as a security guard slash usher and seeing him touring with Sabbath in Los Angeles. I was, of course, working, so it wasn't quite the same as being a fan in the stands just chilling. But I did see most of the show, and what an amazing show it was. During and since that time, Ozzy and Black Sabbath's music has been a part of my life in some form, including some sad memories like me crying to Changes after breaking up with an ex, and some or plenty of fun memories of me buying his Scream album and me singing The Wizard during karaoke with some friends, and me singing Symptom of the Universe in the shower and possibly scaring my flatmates a bit. And me singing Latimer's Mercy in both an attempt to impress my ex-partner and get a good laugh out of her. Good times. As I already mentioned, the rock and metal world lost a titan and a legend last week. Ozzy has come to be known by many names: the Ozzman, the Iron Man, the Godfather and Wizard of heavy metal, and the Prince of Darkness. But his destiny of rock and roll greatness was not always certain. He and his bandmates came from humble working class beginnings in post-war England, making the stories of Ozzy and his band all the more relatable and inspirational. He, of course, began his musical career as the vocalist and frontman of a virtually unknown blues-influenced rock band called Earth in 1968, but they quickly changed their name the next year to Black Sabbath. As a member of the band, he was arguably, but quite literally, a co-founder of a genre and sound that came to be known as heavy metal, itself a derivation of rock and roll and blues with a new twist. Although several other bands of the time, such as Steppenwolf, Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, UFO, and Uriah Heep, among others, absolutely played a role in the growing hard rock scene and partially share responsibility in the creation of what came to be known as heavy metal, it is Black Sabbath that came to be most well known and associated with the beginnings of heavy metal. As many folks like to say, it is the title track off of their eponymous 1970 debut album that started it all. But it was the second track, Paranoid, a song about mental illness and the subject's turn for the worst in their life, off their second album of the same name, that really put them on the map, gained them some mainstream notoriety, and changed the course of music history forever. The dark, distorted, heavy, and thunderous guitar riffs of Tony Iommi, the steady, perfectly timed, infectious, and even jazzy beats of Bill Ward, the deep, growling, and rhythmic bassline backbone of Geezer Butler, and of course the penetrating, howling, and wailing low tenor of Ozzy came to define heavy metal, or at least its humble beginnings. Rock music as we know it would never be the same. Without the influence of Sabbath or something similar to it, countless bands, artists, genres, and even subgenres of music may not have existed as we know them today. So Black Sabbath, and by extension Ozzy's influence, cannot be understated. Much of hard rock, heavy metal of all different varieties as we know them today, punk, post-punk, gothic rock, and cold wave, industrial, grunge, post-grunge, and many others were heavily influenced by and may not have existed as we know them today without their influence, both direct and indirect. And that's how the evolution of music goes. Ozzy himself said in an interview that he was incredibly inspired by the Beatles, and it is their influence that compelled him to get into music. With him saying he wanted to do what they were doing. The rest of the band was already reasonably well versed with their instruments and had begun practicing and gigging by the time 1968 rolled around, but Tony Iommi and the rest admitted that they were gobsmacked when they heard the first two Led Zeppelin albums, and what they heard there, as well as other bands such as Cream, Blue Cheer, and Vanilla Fudge, heavily influenced their sound. They just got that blues rock sound and took it in a darker, heavier, and even a bit scary and more ominous direction. Black Sabbath continued to record music, tour around the world, and slowly and steadily rise in popularity and acclaim throughout the 1970s. But as many of you may know, Ozzy was kicked out of the band in 1979 due to his drunken antics. Ozzy then cleaned up his act, at least temporarily, thanks to his wife, his loving wife, Sharon Osbourne, and went on to team up with the absolutely mind-blowing guitarist and phenomenally talented guitarist, Randy Rhoads, rest in peace, and recorded and released 1980's Blizzard of Oz and 1981's Diary of a Madman, reaching ever higher and dizzying heights as a solo artist. Randy Rhoads then tragically passed in a plane accident while they were touring. Ozzy was initially devastated and fell into a deep depression, but Sharon, as well as his drummer Aldridge, helped him take stock, pick up the pieces, recuperate, and find a replacement for Randy, although he's certainly a very hard act to follow. Ozzy then went on to record 2 more albums with the new guitarist Jake E. Lee, and then an additional 8 albums with guitarist Zakk Wylde, and 1 album with Gus G. That's the Scream album. All the while, Ozzy continued to climb to ever higher heights of musical and pop culture fame and notoriety, coming to his legendary status. Simultaneously, Ozzy began touring on again, off again with his original band Black Sabbath in 1997, but the group did not record any new material until 2013's final album for the group, entitled 13. Meanwhile, he even achieved media personality status with the fly-on-the-wall look at the family life of the Osbournes in 2002 to 2005. He, of course, continued to tour intermittently until 2019, but he was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. This brought his touring days to all but a close, but nevertheless he persisted, refused to throw in the towel, and did a few shows here and there, such as the End tour, ultimately culminating into his final mega concert, Back to the Beginning. A powerful and moving final performance by the legend of rock and heavy metal himself. Now, I hate to even say this about Ozzy, but he was not the most talented vocalist. He didn't have the best singing voice in the business. He certainly didn't have a bad voice, don't get me wrong. He was talented in his own right, but he was no Ronnie James Dio, rest in peace, Ian Gillan, Rob Halford, or Bruce Dickinson. He didn't have the biggest range or the most powerful voice, but ultimately, none of that matters. What he did have was charisma, a wild stage presence, vocal control, and a voice good enough to hit the notes he needed to hit without showing off. He was also able to convey emotional intensity, rawness, and vulnerability with his voice. His penetrating, sometimes wailing, sometimes howling, sometimes cackling, sometimes shouting, and sometimes softly soaring vocals expressed emotional depth and breadth without having the range of a Rob Halford or having the fully perfect pitch and power of a Dio. But honestly, he didn't need a perfect voice, and his success and influence alone are testament to that fact. He just needed a good voice and passion, and he had both. And both the influence of Black Sabbath on the growing hard rock and heavy metal scene, as well as Ozzy's success with Sabbath and his even greater success in his solo career with his unique voice and powerful frontman status, had huge ripple effects on hard rock, heavy metal, and all the other genres and subgenres to come for decades to come. He proved that you didn't need a perfect voice to shine in and succeed in this scene. You just needed a decent voice that got the job done and passion in your delivery. And countless bands and solo acts to come took notes and emulated his example. As an amateur singer, his voice and his story is also an inspiration to me. I was, in fact, in a chorus for a year in college around the same time, but that I was beginning to dive deeply into Ozzy's music. I was a baritone at the time, but thanks to my transition and some vocal practice, I have been able to soften, feminize, and slightly raise my voice. But I can still only get into the lower range of what is possible for a cis woman at best, and the higher range of what is possible for a cis man at the least. And that's if I'm trying. Now, I'm not part of a band or anything like that, and I may never be as successful as a singer or musician. I'm in my 30s now and have very limited musical experience or recent practice to speak of. Yes, of course, as I like to say, it's never too late to start, whether it's your music, dreams, your calling or purpose, or any other passion project in life. But this fact, as well as the challenge of me being a transgender singer, put me at a pretty big disadvantage. Nonetheless, I still hope to use both my speaking and singing voice in some capacity for spirituality related content on this channel in the future, as well as possibly put out my own original musical content to lend my voice to the content of others, especially if I lean into it, learn, practice, and make improvements. My possible future content probably will not resemble the music of Black Sabbath or Ozzy much, but I'm not saying it won't take a little inspiration from his music. It will probably span the breadth from very light and high vibe inspirational content to the occasional somber, dark, and gloomy content. But Ozzy's life story and success story alone are plenty of inspiration as it is. Now let's get into the lyrics. While a lot of folks turn to tearjerkers like Mama I'm Coming Home and Changes and classics like Paranoid upon Ozzy's passing, and I was too, I also turned to hits like Crazy Train and dug deeper into his catalog for metaphysical gems like A National Acrobat, for inspiration and pondering life's big questions in the midst of the passing of someone who fully deserves the title of the man, the myth, and the legend. As I've alluded to, the Prince of Darkness's music was actually quite varied. his and Black Sabbath's music wasn't all dark, heavy, doom and gloom. Ozzy sang songs that spanned the breadth from both real world and fictional horror stories on the one hand to somewhat deep and spiritual ponderings on the nature of life and the universe, messages of love, hope, and unity, inspirational messages about following one's dreams, self belief, and living life to the fullest, and emotional ballads about love, loss, and the complexities of life. In fact, in spite of the rather dark and ominous public perception surrounding Ozzy's original band, Black Sabbath, you could actually argue that they were one of the first Christian rock bands. They just took a rather interesting and unique approach to it. Why would I say that? They actually made many refrains against the devil and against evil and wickedness and against what they saw as problems, evil, and wickedness in the world, and penned one song in particular titled After Forever. That is just straight up proselytizing about Christianity. Ozzy himself was a Catholic. I'm not too sure about the rest of the band members, but Tony Iommi could always be spotted with his signature large metal cross hanging from his neck while performing in concert. Now, I'm not a Christian, but I just thought it was an interesting and even a little funny fact to point out that this band and Ozzy, who suffer from a misguided public perception and association with darkness, evil, and Satanism, were actually Christians. Ozzy and especially Black Sabbath only brought up dark, heavy, and even arguably sinister subject matter not as a way of praising it, but rather as a way of railing against what they saw as problems and evil in the world, such as war, violence, poverty, the dark side of human nature, and the ruination of Mother Earth, as well as singing refrains against evil, wickedness, and the devil. Other examples of his and their refrains against evil, wickedness, and the devil include Sabbath's infamous eponymous song, Black Sabbath, NIB, and Mr. Crowley. Examples of railing against what he and Black Sabbath saw as problems and evils in the world are everywhere in his long career and include Wicked World, Lord of this World, Devil's Daughter, Mr. Crowley, NIB, Children of the Grave, War Pigs, Electric Funeral, Into the Void, Looking for Today, Who Are You, Hard Road, Johnny Blade, Killer of Giants, The Ultimate Sin, Mr. Tinker Train, and his haunting environmental warning cry in Revelation Mother Earth, and Sabbath's Under the Sun, which is ironically kind of a screed not railing against spirituality as such, but rather railing against organized religion. No More Tears, whilst being melodically a beautiful composition, is actually one of Ozzy's darkest songs, at least according to my interpretation of the lyrics. It seems to paint the narrative of a fictional horror story from the perspective of a deranged killer. Other fictional horror stories from the heavy metal madman include Perry Mason, Behind the Wall of Sleep, Bark at the Moon, Iron Man, Johnny Blade, Psycho Man, and Little Dolls. Then there was The Wizard, not so much a fictional horror story as it is a whimsical fictional tale that seems to be about Gandalf from the Lord of the Rings series. Some of the real-world horror stories penned by the heavy metal madman and company include Bloodbath in Paradise about the Charles Manson murders, Miracle Man about a corrupt and twisted and perverted pastor, Latimer's Mercy about a man that tragically killed his very physically disabled daughter, Unalive Solution, and Fire in the Sky. And of course, as you may know, there were also many songs that he sung about mental illness and substance abuse. The, those include the famous Paranoid, Unaliving Yourself to Live, Never Say Die, Diary of a Madman, Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, Snowblind, Loner, Hand of Doom, Unalive Solution, Rock and Roll Doctor, Straight to Hell, Demon Alcohol, and Patient Number 9. As you may know, Ozzy has sung a few songs about some crazy drug trips too, including Sweet Leaf, Over the Mountain, Planet Caravan, although that one also seems to just simply be expressing admiration and awe for the beauty of the universe, Hole in the Sky, and Fairies Wear Boots. But what many people don't know is that this so-called heavy metal madman, or the Prince of Darkness, also sung some really interesting songs that really touch on the nature of spirituality and philosophy and ponderings about the nature of life and the universe. And one of those songs, as I mentioned, is A National Acrobat. A National Acrobat also carries a message of love, hope, and unity embedded within it as well. I'll share some of the lyrics right here. I want you to listen. I'm trying to get through. Love has given life to you, and now it's your concern. Unseen eye of inner life will make your soul return. Still I look, but not to touch. The seeds of life are sown. Curtain of the future falls. The secret stays unknown. Just remember, love is life and hate is living death. Treat your life for what it's worth and live for every breath. Looking back, I've lived and learned, and now I'm wondering. Here I wait and only guess what this next life will bring. And those final lyrics kind of carry some new heavy meaning with the passing of Ozzy. Other such songs include I Don't Know, which seems to be kind of a Socratic exploration on the philosophy of knowledge, but kind of simplified and dumbed down for the average person. But he's saying that don't look to me for wisdom, and Ozzy basically was stating the famous Socratic quote related to knowledge. The only thing I know is that I know nothing, in that song. And another such song is God is Dead, which he's not proclaiming, his atheism or anything like that. It's a more of a philosophical or rather theological exploration of that question. Is God dead? It's something that was put forward by the philosopher Nietzsche, that God is dead, and he was doing an exploration of that idea. As I've said, Ozzy's Catholic. We know what he believes, but it's very interesting to think about, right? And another such song that contains a spiritual / philosophical exploration is Symptom of the Universe. And I'll share a few of those lyrics here as well. Take me through the centuries to supersonic years. Electrifying enemy is drowning in his tears. All I have to give you is a love that never dies. The symptom of the universe is written in your eyes, yeah. Mother Moon, she's calling me back to her silver womb. Father of creation takes me from my stolen tomb. 700th unicorn is waiting in the skies. A symptom of the universe of love that never dies. Yeah. Take my hand, my child of love, come step inside my tears. Swim the magic ocean I've been crying all these years. With our love we'll ride away into eternal skies. A symptom of the universe, a love that never dies, yeah. And a couple other songs that also touch on themes of spirituality and philosophy include Spiral Architect and Center of Eternity. Now, don't get me wrong, he was no rock and roll spiritualist or philosopher as far as we know. Just a few of those songs were some interesting explorations in those subjects, and I've always found them to be such. He wrote plenty of songs about just reckless and wild living and lifestyle, including Never Know Why, Breaking All the Rules, Dirty Women, Hellraiser, Flying High Again, I Don't Want to Stop, Crazy Babies, the supercharged anthem Scream, Steal Away the Night, and No Bone Movies. But on the other hand, he also wrote inspirational messages about following one's dreams, self-belief, and living life to the fullest, including Never Say Die, Lightning Strikes, Gets Me Through, Breaking All the Rules, Shot in the Dark, Supernaut, You Can't Kill Rock and Roll, SATO, Tomorrow's Dream, Desire, and my new favorite solo Ozzy song, well, one of my favorites, Believer, and I'd like to just share a few lyrics from that song as well. You've got to believe in yourself, 'cause no one will believe in you. Imagination like a bird on the wing, flying free for you to use, oh baby. Now, the crazy heavy metal madman that Ozzy was, he didn't write or sing too many love songs that weren't straight up ballads. Those that he did were few and far between, but when Ozzy wrote and or sang these songs, he meant those words. Those include one of my favorite Black Sabbath songs, Sabracadabra, and I Just Want You. And I'd also like to share a few lyrics from Sabracadabra. Feel so good, I feel so fine. Love the little lady always on my mind. She keeps me loving every night and day. Never gonna leave and never going away. Someone to love me. You know she makes me feel alright. Someone to need me. Love me every single night. Feel so happy since I met that girl. When we're making love, it's something out of this world. Feels so good to know that she's all mine. Gonna love that little woman till the end of time. Someone to live for. Love me till the end of time. Makes me feel happy. Good to know that she's all mine. If you don't know much about the Prince of Darkness other than his wild, party hard, rock hard persona, you probably wouldn't guess it, but he was very much a soft, emotional crooner as well as a famous heavy metal madman. He was far more complex than a lot of people give him credit for. Emotional ballads about love, loss, and the complexities of life include Changes, Road to Nowhere, the famous Mama, I'm Coming Home, about his relationship with his wife Sharon, but has been given newfound fame as a farewell song to the legend. See You on the Other Side, another ballad that has received arguably more appropriate newfound fame as a farewell song to the rocker. Time After Time, Junior's Eyes, Goodbye to Romance, Close My Eyes Forever, All My Life, Under the Graveyard, Solitude, and two of my favorite ballads from the crooner of darkness, if you will, Dreamer, and a number he did with Elton John, Ordinary Man. Dreamer is an emotional ballad about the state of the world and wanting better for the people and the planet. And it calls to mind Imagine by John Lennon with a hopeful tone in stark contrast to the epic but ominous warning cry of his other song, Revelation, Mother Earth. And I would just like to share a few lyrics from his song, Dreamer. Gazing through the window at the world outside, wondering will Mother Earth survive, hoping that mankind will stop abusing her sometime. After all, there's only just the two of us, and here we are still fighting for our lives, watching all of history repeat itself time after time. I'm just a dreamer, I dream my life away. I'm just a dreamer who dreams of better days. I watch the sun go down like every one of us. I'm hoping that the dawn will bring a sign, a better place for those who will come after us this time. I'm just a dreamer, I dream my life away. Oh yeah, I'm just a dreamer who dreams of better days. Your higher power may be God or Jesus Christ. It doesn't really matter much to me. Without each other's help, there ain't no hope for us. I'm living in a dream, a fantasy. If only we all could just find serenity. It would be nice if we could live as one. When will all this anger, hate, and bigotry be gone? I'm just a dreamer, I dream my life away. I'm just a dreamer who dreams of better days. Okay. Then there was his other ballad, Ordinary Man, a humble, emotional, and vulnerable ballad about ultimately just being an ordinary guy behind all the fortune and fame. And he certainly was a kind, caring, funny, witty, sometimes deep and sophisticated, real, genuine, down to earth, emotionally raw and vulnerable, flawed, average, ordinary family man who came from very humble beginnings on the one hand, but a wild, legendary rock star and an inspirational success story on the other hand. If you haven't heard that one, I strongly recommend it. Me singing that will certainly not do justice. It's a beautiful, beautiful ballad with Elton John. And as I mentioned, Ozzy also had songs with just beautiful messages of love, hope, motivation, inspiration, and unity. I already mentioned some of them, but a couple of specific songs include St. Vitus Dance and his famous Crazy Train. I'm sure most of you are very familiar with how that song starts. Crazy, but that's how it goes. Millions of people living as foes. Maybe it's not too late to learn how to love and forget how to hate. He also managed to stay relevant way past the prime of his career with the nu metal inspired Scream album from 2010 and his collaboration with the rapper Post Malone on Take What You Want, a song about a tumultuous and toxic relationship in 2019. He was setting trends with Black Sabbath in the 1970s and proving his enduring relevance in his 70s. What a legend. Finally, he had a couple of humble pleas to fans to not treat him like an idol in spite of his legendary rock and roll status. With the songs I Don't Want to Change the World and Hero, showing his deep humility in spite of his massive fame and fortune. And I would like to share just a few lyrics from those songs as well. Standing at the crossroads, world spinning round and round. Know which way I'm going, you can't bring me down. Don't you try to teach me no original sin. I don't need your pity for the shape I'm in. I don't want to change the world. I don't want the world to change me. I don't want to change the world. I don't want the world to change me, oh no. I don't want to be a hero. I don't want to ever let you down. No, I don't want to let you down. I can try to take you higher, but I don't want to wear your broken crown. You know it brings me down. Don't think you'll ever understand me. I don't even understand me. Don't have the power to anoint you. And I don't want to disappoint the fools no more. The fools no more. I couldn't answer all your questions, and if you're lost, I couldn't find the way. I couldn't find your way. You know you'll have to face the music. You change your tune, you don't know what to play. So don't you run away. Everybody's talking crazy, so think I am a devil maybe. I don't want to hear about it. Don't want to have to scream and shout it. Don't want to have to scream and shout at fools no more. The fools no more. So I don't wanna be a hero. Don't wanna sit upon your crippled throne. I've got a life of my own. I am not your destination, or a road that's gonna lead you home. So baby, please don't go. 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 And Ozzy actually wrote those final lyrics, "Please Don't Go," as kind of a message to his audience and to the fans in light of a few unfortunate, misguided teens who were deeply into his music but took their lives in the 1980s. And there was this whole controversy, part of the whole satanic panic at the time, against Ozzy because they were attributing those teenagers' deaths to his music. And it was just a few unfortunate misguided souls that didn't get the help that they needed and that they should have received. But those final lyrics hit in a different way now that Ozzy's gone. And these past couple weeks, I've been seeing all the outpouring of love and sorrow over his passing from fans all over the world, in real life and online, as well as from tons of other musicians and celebrities. And it's really touched me. For the Prince of Darkness, he sure brought a lot of light. He sure brought a lot of light and love and joy into people's lives and touched people's lives deeply. And many of his lyrics were just carrying messages of love, hope, unity, and inspirational messages about living life to the fullest and chasing your dreams, in spite of this dark persona that he had also built up throughout his career through the years. Now, in spite of all his songs with messages of love, hope, unity, motivation, and inspiration, as well as songs revealing his humility and his ballads full of emotional rawness and vulnerability, he was no stranger to controversy, and he was no misunderstood saint in black, if you will. But he never pretended to be or claimed to be. He had his fair share of controversies connected to his name, as well as his very human struggles with mental health and substance abuse. Biting the head off of a bat in concert in the 1980s, physically assaulting his wife Sharon in 1989, and shooting cats and birds wandering onto his property in during the 2020 pandemic. While I certainly find these actions horrible and shocking, and arguably unacceptable, I can't judge. And for one, as far as biting the head off of a bat in concert, he was supposedly very, very high on drugs, and he didn't know what was happening. Somebody just tossed something to him from the crowd, and he thought this was a toy bat, and he would just bite the head off for a laugh. But yeah, it's a wild story, but yeah. But like I was saying, I certainly can find these actions shocking and arguably unacceptable, but I can't judge too harshly or condemn too harshly, especially now that he's gone. Nobody's perfect, myself included. I have, for example, unfortunately participated in the killing of some animals for food, although I have paid others to do it. But on the other hand, he brought a lot of joy, fun times, and companionship to millions of people the world around, to millions of people the world over. And his core good nature comes through in some of his actions, like this one story I recently came across about him taking time out of his busy touring schedule to visit a child suffering with cancer in the hospital who was a fan, and had made a wish to see him. And while certainly an imperfect husband and father, his core, good, caring nature and amazing sense of humor came across to millions of people, millions of viewers of the Osbournes. This titan of dark, heavy rock and a legendary vocalist truly did bring a lot of light. Rest in peace, Ozzy, and my heartfelt condolences to Sharon and the family. Blessed be. Take care, everyone.